your attention, please.
You got the touch.
This is the kind of thing that just tickles my balls. Not ramping down. Just getting started. Nothing stops this train.
Who are you?
Oh, you better be joking.
Greetings. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode Down for the Count, Part 2, 135.
We're back.
We are. I was getting ready to type something, and I've like, the "oh, but you better be joking." I swear I get distracted by that music because I like it in the all the quotes and stuff. And I guess it was a couple of weeks ago we were sitting here, and I'm like, "Oh man, there was about 2 minutes of intro we played before I started, just because I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool."
You caught up in the moment. It's a good intro, and if you're listening to this and you can't figure out why you couldn't find it live or anything, and you missed us pointing it out last week, this was pre-recorded.
Yes, this is pre-recorded. There is a pre-recorded audio audio version that you're listening to right now on the iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you find top quality podcast, or you're watching this and listening on YouTube,
but not live.
No, but you can still comment. Please feel free to comment. Now, I don't have any listener email. We don't have anything like that because I'm so excited to get back into this because I'll be honest. I really, once I started researching, and if you didn't listen last week, go back and listen. We'll do a quick recap here in just a moment, but we're the episode Down for the Count. We're taking a deep look into the Chris Benoit murders that happened on June 22nd, 2007. And if you want more information on this, be sure to check out Purple Sky 11, all one word, at YouTube. Purple Sky 11, all one word, at YouTube. But just to bring everybody up to speed as to what we talked about last time, Justin, before we get started.
Well, we dipped our toe a little bit into kind of the circumstances around the murders and what we had heard leading up to them, what media coverage was. And at that time I wasn't as immersed in wrestling as I had been. So I wasn't on the old school chat rooms and stuff like I used to be back in the day, but still that was making its rounds on the chat rooms and in the various different locations. And we kind of touched on what we'd heard about, who was there, what was found, who found it, and you got a little bit into the police files that you had looked at, and then I got into a little bit of the stuff that I'd kind of checked up and looked into. So, and without saying really where we fell now or everything that we had found, I think we laid a pretty good foundation.
Yes.
For the story. And you and I had talked, I think maybe in the very first or second episode together. And we talk about this a lot of times after sex in bed, you and I, about joining up and bringing kind of that static and noise stuff over, and I had mentioned, and you had mentioned as well that,
and then we're definitely going to do that. I already to do that with this episode. I thought, well, if I do that and then we come back with pre-record, that might, bite us the ass.
I think this is a good lead into it because this is going from that something that may or may not have been poorly handled by investigators, but also, I've been really interested in where you're more interested on that side of where police fail. And for me, it's where the justice system may fail. And this may not hit that category, but it definitely hits the first. There
is a guy, let me look him up really quick because I will, and I've not told you about this. So I'm dropping a bomb on you. This will surprise you. Give me 1 second. Let me look just to make sure what the Facebook group is. There's a guy that has became internet famous. Give me 1 second. Man, I don't. How do you? Sometimes I hate it when Facebook messes with the stuff because I can find stuff, and then there's other times that they move it around and it's not there anymore, and you can't find it. It just aggravates the hell out of me.
The algorithm messes up.
It's there's a guy in Mississippi whose name is Jimbo that has been harassed by a Mississippi State trooper for the last few years. He started a Facebook group against this officer, and some of the stuff that has been recorded that he's got from the officer's body cam, I mean, it's blatant harassment. And he is really big on Facebook, and his story's been reported on several, like lackluster.com, some of the other bigger ones, and they have reported on what has happened to him. Well, I'm going to have an interview with him coming up, but I am going to reach out to him, and I apologize. I can't.
I've got a question for him.
Okay, what's that?
Is it a chance of mistaken identity with him? Because I would imagine there's a lot of damn Jimbos in that area.
No, it is not a chance. So, well, that is a very good question.
That's probably the country's highest population of Jimbos and Jimmy Darrells. Is right there.
See, I'm in my groups on Facebook, and I can't find it. So it's like unit something. I don't even know. I have to go back and look for it. But I figured that would be a good episode to have him on. I also, I don't know if I can get her back on, but what I've got in mind, and I didn't look. I put a poll up yesterday on a Static and Noise YouTube page. And I may be doing a weekly show, but I recorded an interview back in January with a lady, and I know I've told you about this.
Yeah.
Her video came out last year where she ran from the police over a ticket. He tased her, kind of roughed her up and so forth. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I remember.
I have an interview with her that I recorded in January. I've sat on that because she gets off probation at the end of this month. So I'll be dropping that. That may be something else that we review, cool. That we actually review on the show on both, here at You Bubblegum and Static and Noise, and, comment and stuff on it. But we're definitely going to do that. But I got really hooked on this case. And to, just to go along with what Justin said, to quickly recap, 90% of what I'm going to be talking about are from the Fayetteville, Georgia Sheriff's Department case file. Now, they should have facts in this. Yeah. So a police report should be your most credible source of information. This police report is one of the most shittiest, whatever the word is. It is awful. You have the next door's neighbor's name, her first name was Holly, and her last name is Scheffer, Schreppfer. I don't know if that's not how you pronounce it. I apologize, but they got it spelled two different ways. They got it misspelled in the police report. There's things that's not signed or dated. You have witness statements that are not signed or dated. You have, just if this was reviewed by a supervisor, this supervisor is an idiot. I mean, he really is, because you don't sign off on stuff like this, because there's so many misconceptions in this. And I'll give you one really quick, and then we'll talk about it. One officer stated that Chris Benoit was hanging from the gym equipment. Another officer says he was kind of sitting in front of the gym equipment. Another officer says he is slumped over the gym equipment. That's all in the report, and they're ruling it a murder-suicide.
Well,
those are huge red flags.
I think that's indicative of not really good police work, and you know that much better than I do. But I think maybe part of the situation might be, okay, maybe this felt like an open and shut case to them, which is not an excuse, but in doing
far beyond an open and shut case.
Oh yes, but maybe in there, because I've heard other cops say it. I've got a lot of family that's in law enforcement, and you've been in, but I've heard cops say it. Sometimes you get tunnel vision and you don't want to, and you don't expect, but maybe they got this tunnel vision of this is clearly what happened, and that led to shoddy police work, which in the end, regardless, say they are right and say it is that clear cut and they're exactly right, their shoddy police work led to this internet uproar of, conspiracy and stuff. If nothing else, it contributed to that because it wasn't documented well and they didn't do a good job with it.
No, they did not. And based on this case report, okay, if you're a police officer, you're supposed to go by the facts at the scene. If I was on this scene helping search this almost 6,000 square foot house, my vote would be there's more to this. This is not a murder-suicide. Now, I will explain why at the end that I say that. I will explain why the report is terrible. And we'll fill in those gaps.
Now, you mentioned that about finding the body. I will say this. I know for sure on the Dark Side of the Ring episode, they interview, I think, both deputies, male and female, that found the body. And I remember them saying that it looked almost as though he was hanging there, like standing there, by the way it looked, because of the mirror. They saw the reflection in the mirror and stuff. But I want to say it was on that episode that maybe the lady said when she opened the door, she saw him sitting there, as in a but that may not have been. I did hear that. I did hear someone say that he was either in a sitting or prone position. And I did hear one of them say, and these are actual live interviews.
Right.
I did hear one of them say that he was hanging. And I know for sure that that was the man, the gentleman that found him, and that was on the Dark Side of the Ring documentary. I know that I heard him say there they found him, but I did hear that discrepancy. And really, for whatever reason, that kind of just blew by because I'm thinking of it in interview form, because you'll get that in interview form. Sometimes people just forget, as well as I do. Eyewitness testimony is the worst testimony in the world. However, on a crime scene investigation where there's pictures and documentation and these things, and like you had touched on in that first one, we've not seen crime scene pictures that show the bodies in their final positions. But in that instance, you would expect a level of consistency through the report that you may not get in live interviews. I don't expect consistency in live interviews. I just don't. I don't put a lot of stock in eyewitness testimony. However, I do expect that in the reporting process because, like you said, here's these photos, here's multiple people here. There should be a way to verify something as simple, because that is simple, to verify the position that the body was found in.
Right. Very good. But we'll come back at the end. I will give my opinion. Justin, your opinion thinks as of now that he done this, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And I did not come in thinking that was 100%. I was a little split on it coming in.
Do you think it's 100% him?
Yes.
Well, I think.
But I do know you've got some information I don't have.
Oh, I have some very good information. Just yesterday by itself, I spent 3 hours just searching 2 things, and I did find them. Very deep online. But we'll go ahead and get started. Again, on June 27, 2007, an official from the WWE called the Fayetteville, Georgia Sheriff's Department and requested a welfare check at the home of Chris Benoit, one of their performers who missed an event, actually missed several events. So the Sheriff's Department goes there, as Justin said, a male and female. And when they arrive, they find the gate, the entry gate, locked. They can't drive up the driveway, long driveway. It's locked. They can't get in. So they, I guess, cross the fence or so forth. They find their way up to the house, but there's 2 large German shepherds that are like in a pen, and inside the pen is a side door entrance. After they search all around and can't make entry, they don't want to damage the house because at this point in time, it's just a welfare check. Just see if he makes home, if everyone's okay. Now, Chris Benoit had told people at the WWE the reason that he had missed shows prior to the live event is because his wife, Nancy, and son, Daniel, had food poisoning, and they were very sick, and they were throwing up.
Yeah, but he had not contacted the company. He had contacted Chavo Guerrero and Scott Armstrong
Right.
separately.
Okay. You are exactly right. So the officers radio back to dispatch and tell them about the dogs. They call the official back at the WWE that called them. They tell dispatch, tell the officers to go to the house to the left of the residence and ask for Holly, Schieffer. And she knew the Benoits. She might have a gate code. She may have a spare key. She may be able to do something with the dogs. So she goes next door. She meets the deputies, and they explain to her while they're there. The deputies tell her to put the dogs away and see if the Benoits are home. So this next door neighbor takes control of these dogs. Animal control is not called. And they let her walk into this house not knowing exactly what is going on. When she goes into the house, she yells for Nancy. She yells for Daniel. She yells for Chris. She goes upstairs to the second floor. She finds Daniel's body in his bed. She screams and rushes out of the residence and tells them, quote, someone murdered Daniel. So at that point, these two deputies radio that in. They make entry. Now, I was not able to find if they stayed together and, did required search patterns. I don't know how they did it. I don't know if one took one floor and one took the next. At that point, they knew how to get to Daniel's bedroom because Holly told them how to get there. They go and find Daniel's body. They confirm that he is, in fact, deceased. Then they search the rest of the house. They find Nancy. And then they find Chris last. So, they've already called other people in at this point. Now, sending a neighbor into an unknown situation is not police procedure. That is a huge red flag. You do not know what's in there. Her safety is in danger. Imagine if somebody jumped out and shot her. She'd be dead. It's the officer's fault for coming back and asking her to do that. According to the police report, okay, now, like I said a little bit earlier, this is a 6,000 square foot house. In my opinion, and it's fact because you can look at it, the police report, if it was reviewed and approved at all, it was hastily because there's grammatical errors, there's spelling errors in regards to witnesses. Pages contradicts themselves. You'll have it say something on one page, you turn to the next page, or a few pages after, and it says the total opposite of what you just read. Signed statements, or their statements, witness statements, they're not signed and dated. Huge red flag. As Justin said, the crime scene photos of the bodies have never been released 16 years later. Autopsy photos of the bodies have never been released 16 years later. Keep that in mind. It's been 16 years. Why would you not put those pictures out? Why?
Well, I wonder if, because in general, they wouldn't be released, though, would they? I mean, just with any other case, they wouldn't publicly be released unless somebody requested that.
You could request them.
But
and
I don't think the parents of Chris Benoit have no doubts. His son doesn't have any doubts. And then the sister, so I'm assuming the family of Nancy, because the sister, they don't have any doubts as to what happened. Like they feel like the narrative they've been given is pretty accurate. So if they're not asking, is that public information? And could you file a Freedom of Information Act and get that?
Yes, you could. Yes, you could. So Chris's son, David, thinks that his dad did it?
Yes.
Okay. Where did you find that at online?
There's a couple interviews with him. He does feel like his dad should be in the Hall of Fame, but and things that he had said kind of leaned me more. That helped me kind of get to where I was, because what most of the last part of research I'd done was CTE, research and what these guys kind of go through and stuff. I see. We do have somebody kind of helping us out and getting us some information to make sure our sound was good and stuff. And he said he thinks the lawsuits regarding Nancy's pictures probably deterred any additional pictures to be released. They received compensatory but not punitive damages for that in 2011. Okay, so they released.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But the difference here is this would fall under the Freedom of Information Act. And unless pictures inhibit an ongoing case, you have to put those out there if you have them. But that is a very good point made by our backstage guy, our roadie. We'll call him our roadie, or our ring man, right? Because we're doing, this is wrestling themed, And I think, okay, there, you're back with me. You missed my jokes, but that's totally fine. So I hadn't said anything important. I named him Rody or Ring Man, and he said he prefers Sexy Manager. So our Sexy Manager, I provided that really good.
Valet. Sexy valet.
Did you hear the comment that I made about the Freedom of Information Act, Justin, before you froze up there?
You said that it would still fall under Freedom of Information, but all right, considering the case concluded that he was the murderer, as far as they're concerned, they concluded that would make him public. But does Daniel and Nancy's photos, are those still
anything that they have? Well, no, that depends on how you word your Freedom of Information Act request. It's best to be like really specific, because police departments are not going to just voluntarily, like if you wanted a report from this incident, June 22nd, 2007. Well, it actually wasn't discovered until June 25th, 2007.
Yeah.
But let's say you wrote in and you're like, hi, my name's Justin, through the Freedom of Information Act, U.S. code, and then give all the numbers and stuff. I request a copy of a report from the Chris Benoit case, June 25th, 2007. That's vague. They may give you one piece of paper. How you need to word stuff is you need to put any and all reports in regards to list the date, list the location, list people involved, list the address. That way you get every single thing and they can't keep any information from you. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Yes. You've got to be very specific so it doesn't give them an opportunity to hide stuff.
Now, the only reason that you can, now let's say that they wanted to, and this goes along with what Sexy Manager said, they wanted to protect the family, even though they legally had to put these out. They may blur out the whole body. You might not be able to see anything, but you would still get something. It may be redacted. You would still get something. No one has even got redacted photos. That's a huge red flag to me right there. And if someone says these are too brutal, you can't put these out. I know it was a different time period. Look at the Sharon Tate case and all those Charles Manson victims. All those photos are out. Look at the Kennedy autopsy photos. You can find those online. So,
yeah.
What are you doing? Playing words with friends?
Well, no, that's what I was looking at. There's a Chapter 92.5 limited disclosure of crime scene thing in Georgia. And I'm curious if Georgia is different in its laws, than say, because I know a federal, because what you're saying is a federal law. That would
but it applies to everybody. The Freedom of Information Act. So now Georgia is different, because I've had some cases that I've investigated and had to deal with some officials in Georgia, and
there's a lot
of what's that?
There's a lot of inbreeding there too. So that
now we have let's see. Sexy Manager.
You could actually share that.
I'm gonna click on that link really quick.
I'm on it right now. You could share that, I believe.
This may have been one that I've saw. Yeah. I've actually saw this one. So and this is I'll go ahead and share this link with everybody in the chat here. So, but let me go to the comments and throw this link out there. But there's I find it odd that I'm not able to post that in the comments. Well, shit.
Can you see us right there?
Yes, I see you and then your screen. So.
Okay. So that is, and does it show you the web address up here?
No.
Okay. Well, this is autopsyfiles.org is where where this was found? This has got
I
sent to
can
us.
copy and paste it in my notepad and add it in the description of the video.
Okay, so that just let them. That's kind of a look at it, and I'll get rid of that now. All right, is it back to just us?
Save that really quick. So that's the same one I saw. I feel like the family is going to be in distress. And that's true. Now, if they're sealed, they would have to state, they would have to send you notification back, either electronic or mail, that, you know, they can't provide you that information because it's sealed. So, but they
See, I don't even necessarily,
as I found out.
Is it in regards to that? Like, I don't necessarily feel like that's a bad thing that they've not shared them. If both families, you know, so I can see that, and
right.
you know, I think that's probably a good idea that they didn't share them. I do, however, with in regards to Chris, maybe like you said, if it was just blurred, if there is question to the validity of where he was and his position, that might be something, even with the whole body blurred, just something for position,
right.
Or a reproduction, a animated illustration reproduced by law enforcement from the actual photo.
That there would be laws on that. I don't know if you could do that or not. Because but you know, I don't think it's bad that they've not released it. I'm just saying that's a huge red flag that they've not. So they've not gave any explanation why.
I think that's because you're so familiar with the process. See, for somebody like me, like that didn't surprise me. I was like, okay, well, you know, I was sure they wouldn't release that, but I could see now why, especially in a case like this, like why people, you know, why there would be question and debate over those pictures, because, you know, like you said, some of those discrepancies right down to what position he was found in would make a big difference.
Yes,
if you could see that.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, police came, they roped off everything. Several officers on scene, which, you know, when you have that many people on scene, unless you have a really good skilled supervisor, and they did not in this case, you're going to have sloppy police work. You're going to have people going over people, you know, this and that. Now, 5,600, you know, a little bit over 5,600 square foot house, huge house, big crime scene, plus all the area on the outside crime scene. 3 days they were gone. Nancy's family had possession and was in the house. The family of Nancy called police back numerous times to collect evidence they had missed. One piece of evidence was a note found inside a Bible with personal belongings to Chris when they were, like, you know, putting his stuff, when they were boxing the stuff up to ship to his dad. Now, his dad has claimed in interviews this was a suicide note that he found. That's not true. You know, I don't know. I've not saw a recorded video interview of his dad saying that. I have saw a written article that said his dad said that.
And those have been problematic. We both found that.
According to the police file, that did not happen. It was found by Nancy Benoit's family because the police missed it. Now, the note simply said, "I'm preparing to leave this earth." People have took that as a suicide note when it was inside a Bible. Why was he not writing down a passage? Now, that was handwritten, the note, but they did also find in the history on the computer pretty much the exact same passage. But that does not mean that's a suicide note.
Well, the thing as far as, like, and I never thought about that till you just said that. That is odd. Like, if that's the exact wording of it, that is odd, because technically most people would say by studying the Bible, you're preparing for when you do leave this earth. But you did mention internet records and the stuff on the resurrection of the child in the Bible and stuff like that. That stuff. And then he was a very agnostic, at least I wouldn't say atheist, but very agnostic before his friendship with Eddie Guerrero. Right. So if the CTE started earlier, and I believe it did, and I believe that, you know, I've people talk about gun laws all the time. I think religious laws are just as important. That's why I firmly support separation of church and state. Religion can be a very dangerous thing in the wrong hands, especially somebody's not mentally there. So that's another thing, that search history and his mentality there, that kind of pushed me to where I ended up going as well.
Exactly. I mean, there's, and there was other cases where the police, and this was in their police reports, they had to come back. They come back a second time and collected needles and steroids that were found inside a boot that was inside luggage that was in a closet.
So that was in the report that they found needles on site. Because see, I had everything that I'd looked through, because I had been told that they found them and that there were track marks on Daniel, which there weren't. But
there weren't.
I was, my understanding was, but in this, it was always to support the opposite. It was always to support that it was a conspiracy. I'd heard that no needles were ever found. So if needles were found, that explains a little bit to me. Like I can understand.
Needles were found. I mean, we'll start with Daniel, where he was the first one that was discovered. Okay. There was a knife under his bed. Now, there is no mention in the police report if it had fingerprints on it. None at all. Just a knife was under the bed, ordinary kitchen knife.
And there's a crime scene photo that shows it literally sticking out the edge of the bed towards the head of the bed.
Now, if you stab somebody, that's a violent murder. If you do that to a child, that's a heinous murder.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to be, and I know this is going to fit in with your thought process of this case. You've got to be messed up in the head. Okay. And I want you to think about this for a second. If you're that messed up in the head, why would you not go ahead and do it?
Because to me, and because of what they think his method of murdering Daniel was, I think he just tried to find the easiest way, to do it.
Okay.
And
all right.
I also think that maybe the knife was more for what he was planning to do after in the attempted resurrection of Daniel, and making him bleed and bloodletting him after he had died.
Okay. Now, let's say, for instance, that Chris Benoit could be innocent.
Yeah.
All right. Let's say this was done by people we don't know or a person we don't know. All right. And we have agreed that stabbing someone is a violent crime. If you're doing it to a child, it's a heinous crime.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if your brain is as messed up as the media reported from other cases in the past, you're not going to have a moment where you snap to your senses and drop the knife under the bed. You're going to go ahead and do it. If you're thinking, wait 1 second. If you've been hired to do a job, or somebody's got you in a position where you have to do something you don't want to, and they don't care how you do it, they just want it done. And you enter a room with a child, you see that child in bed. Child could have been asleep because it was on a Friday night. Okay. People will say he was murdered on Saturday. No, Friday night. We're saying Friday. For sake of argument right now, we're going to say Friday night. You walk into that room, that child's asleep. You see that child. You drop that knife. You come up with another plan.
Yeah.
That's somebody that is thinking.
Yeah,
because they couldn't do it because it was a child. So they come up with something else.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah, I could see that. But
that's how the knife got there.
To me, it explains to me this. If he did it, it's basically the same thing to me. He sees that this is his son, and he can't do it, because that's the problem with something like CTE. You may have split seconds of clarity, but it's so in and out and so blurred that you don't like. I've got best way to put it, because it's a private thing. Like I have, and I'll tell you afterwards, and tell you guys. I have an acquaintance that lot of head trauma as a child, a lot of head trauma in the military, and then a lot of head trauma that's kind of piled up, and a lot of brain damage due to it. And they lose days, and they threaten people they love, and they can't talk to you. Like if you look at the Eddie Guerrero tribute show and how Chris just broke down, this person, I love them dearly. They're very close to me. just a normal everyday conversation. They can't have it without crying the whole time. And I see the erratic behavior, and I've seen aggression that was instant, and I've seen that aggression shift to the exact polar opposite almost instantly to sorrow and regret and love. So it's a rapid fire thing. It is a quick as a hiccup, just change.
Right. You know, and I'm just throwing this out there, and I'm asking you to have an open mind. And from all the stuff that I read about his brain and all this, if it was as bad as they said it was, I think Daniel's body would have been viciously, heinously stabbed multiple times.
Well, now you may have read something differently than me. His brain was definitely as bad as they said. One of the worst cases they'd ever seen.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, I don't think he would have had that moment of clarity and snap to. I don't think Chris took the knife there. I think it's highly likely that someone else did.
Well, I'd always thought that maybe it was Nancy, and in defense of Daniel, and that he had struck her and killed her first, and then Daniel.
That is a good point, but we'll get to that in just a minute, and I'll tell you why I don't think it is Nancy. Okay. Just note that Daniel did have his pajamas on.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, people that the police talked to did tell them that Chris and Nancy did have an argument over an insurance policy or a trust fund that was set up in Canada, where his ex-wife Martina was listed as the beneficiary, and the amount on that was $250,000. Nancy confronted Chris with this, and he said that was for his kids in case something happened to him. Now, I did not dive in to look to see if they collected it, because I know in the United States, if you commit suicide, you cannot, nobody collects off an insurance policy. I don't know what the laws are in Canada. I didn't look. I just think it's interesting that they did get in an argument over that, and several people outside the household knew it. Did you read that, Justin? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I hadn't, and you can get a policy that will pay out even in regards to suicide.
Okay,
but the premiums are extremely high. But again, like with Canada, I don't know, because his daughter has never been public about any of this, because he has a daughter from that first marriage too. Right. She's never been, about it. But now I've heard 3 or 4 people in interviews, especially Nancy's sister, like when Nancy's sister's one that come out and said, hey, Daniel doesn't have fragile X, and shouldn't have all this, because she had custodial right of him in case of anything happened to them, which means medical records and stuff failed her. And I've heard her say it, and I will say this, I've never seen any documentation of it, but they were divorced. They had so many falling outs so recently. They were divorced.
Now, see, I never found that. I found that she filed for one, but that she dropped it.
Well, now that could be
these murders.
Could be a statement that got blurred. And that's what I'm saying. I've never seen it officially, but her sister referenced it a couple times, and I want to say that somebody had referenced it because they felt Vicky Guerrero, because she felt maybe guilty, and I could be messing this up because I didn't write it down because it didn't seem like a big deal at the time. Right. But maybe she felt guilty for helping them kind of patch things up and get back together, because after Eddie died, whatever, something triggered in Chris. Like he was a different person publicly and privately after the death of Eddie Guerrero.
Okay. Now there's 2 things here I want to, I will comment on what that, and then I want to make one thing and take a break really quick. I hadn't read that. I had read, like I said, that she had filed for divorce and filed a protective order and was granted all those things with custody of Daniel, but she dropped all of it. And that was a year before, the murders happened. So I didn't read into it a whole lot because I was focused on, the other stuff, Yeah. And I'm going to say this, and we'll take a quick break. Now, this happened in June and February 2008. The sheriff's office released the final case report and said it was closed. That quick.
Wow.
That quick.
So if they come to a conclusion like that, The family really has no say anyway. Like, so even if the family disagrees with their findings, they would have to either take it, I guess, to court or do a private inquiry. That they wouldn't get any say, would they, on when it's closed and when it's not?
No, they would not. We're going to take a quick break, and I'll be back in just a moment. We will be back in just a moment. Give me 1 second here. Justin, let me go over to our brand thing so I can throw up some a nice little break video on a loop for us here. We'll be back. You're listening and watching here to Chew Bubblegum 2.0. Welcome back.
We're back.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I had to go.
I had to empty my pee jug.
Yeah, me too. So we talked about Daniel and how he was found and where he was found. And I just announced that the police completed and released the case file and said the case was closed in February of 2008. That's not a long time, you know. Plus, the police, like I said, they were called back several times to collect evidence that they missed. Now, in the police report, now this may not sound like a big deal, but it is. Okay. There was a sink full of dirty dishes. There was a sink full of dirty dishes that looked like they had been there a few days, a deputy noted. There was also one single plate on the kitchen counter. In the trash, there was 10 beer cans found. Now, neither Nancy nor Chris had beer in their system at all.
Yeah, but by the time they were recovered and by the time toxicology was done, based on what and I've heard the guy from HBO that does the show say this about other cases, but based on, and it could be inaccurately reported, but based on what they said out of Georgia, you wouldn't detect the alcohol at that point. It would have been out of the system.
Well,
which confused me because they're dead.
How would it have been out of the system when your body's decomposing?
I don't know, but I've heard that in multiple places, and it doesn't make sense to me. But not just about that case. I'd heard that it.
I'm not a medical examiner. I'm not a medical examiner, you know, and I could be wrong, but it looks to me like, you know, when you die, your body, you know, you'll have discharge from your mouth, discharge from your anus, you know, and sometimes your ears, other orifices, you know, and usually you'll take a Q-tip or you'll take a swab, not a Q-tip, a swab, and you'll collect stuff like that, you know, to see if it, you know, belongs to that person. If it, you know, matches what's in their system, you know, especially in a high profile case like this, you would do everything correct by the book, dot the I's, cross the T's. You would not cut corners anywhere. And
that's like
already we cannot find that they've done it. They have cut corners.
With it, the liver has to process it.
Uh-huh.
So I would have just thought it'd have to be in the liver, because if they died before it was processed, so maybe I'm misunderstanding. Maybe they're putting a timeline that they really have no way of knowing and saying, oh yeah, they drunk this prior to the incident, and that's why it's not in the system, because maybe that's what they're meaning by it. But
right.
If that is what they're meaning, how do they verify that timeline? Because they can't verify the timeline of the last day as well as they would like. So that's interesting. Really, that makes their case look kind of shoddy if that's what they're saying. But I can't remember the case, but I had the big famous medical examiner guy that was on all the HBO shows stuff. I'd heard him mention that before too. And again, it could be me getting it out of context. So I don't want to say that as though but there's not been anywhere that's an official outlet that I've heard anything different. That's always been the narrative that I've heard, is that,
well, you know,
it was
like I said, I'm not a medical examiner, but I mean, the way with modern science is today, I mean, you can find out pretty much anything from with all of the tests and stuff. They can do
last meal. You know, they can do last meal from stomach content. Yep. I would have to assume that there's enough chemical makeup there from alcohol, unless you're saying, hey, it's, you know, they drunk this way before they died. Then how do you know that?
Okay. Now, people have stated that Nancy would never leave dirty dishes in the sink. Never. And her trash with all that stuff in it. Never.
Yeah.
Now, for some reason, this deputy thought that was special to note that.
Yeah.
To not only take a picture, but to make a notation in his field note. To me, that tells, I mean, you know, the deputy that done that, and it did not name him he did name him in the police report, but I didn't write it down. You know, good job to him. Okay. I'm going to say this before I'll save that. I mean, I've got like 6 pages of notes. Give me 1 second.
That's me. I've sat and went through this book and just page after page in this stupid book.
Okay, I can go over this. All right. So here's some. Okay, so before we go on to his, we'll go to the room where Nancy was found in. She was found in an office and over the garage room. In this room was, stated that that's where she liked to watch TV at. It was an office that, had a lot of wrestling memorabilia. And from notes that was on the desk, it was believed to have been Chris Benoit's office. Is where her body was found at. Okay. Now, she had a HDMI cord around her neck. She'd been strangled. She also had, her body was covered as well, but her feet were also bound with like black athletic tape. And it matched up to what Chris had in his weight room. Now, Chris was a lot bigger than Nancy.
Yeah.
I'm keeping an open mind, and this is, just keep an open mind. He was a lot bigger than Nancy. Okay. He could control her really easy. All right. I find it strange that if a husband was going to do this, he would bind her feet together. I just find that strange, because normally to make something look like a home invasion or a home invasion is when people are bound and gagged and so forth. And you would do that to a woman because, Daniel's a child. Chris is a big muscular guy. She's a short little woman. She's probably going to be able to run fast.
Yeah.
So if you were in this house to harm this family, it would make sense to tie her up, to bound her feet, to make sure she could not run away. Because if she runs away, she could spoil everything.
Yeah. And it does kind of lend itself to that being a hostage and being alive in that situation for a while. Not an instant death, not tied up and then killed, right. Being alive for a while, like somebody's keeping you there.
Exactly. So, I just find it strange with Chris so much bigger than her, so much stronger than her, why he would bind her feet that way.
Yeah.
I just think that's weird. I wanted to point that out. So then let's go down to Chris Benoit. He was found in his gym room, in his basement. There was reports from deputies. Well, before we get to that, a fabric was found around his neck, which prevented from cutting his skin. We mentioned that in part 1. And then the weight cable was around his neck. Why would you put fabric around your neck that wouldn't cut your skin? Why would you do that?
I think with that comes down to more his experience, combat experience, and wrestling, especially with where he come from. Like, I understand wrestling's fake. Mm-hmm. It's a shoot, but the ability of guys in that ring, you've got guys that are very capable at what they do. And I don't know his amateur wrestling background. He may not have had one, but he had become a very good tactician in the ring. You'll see a lot of people that, like you'll see in these movies, they'll jerk out the little metal string and I forget what they're called and choke the guys with it because it's very effective. Right. It is. But I think something that used to be taught, at least martial arts wise, and become to be regarded as just poor information is that larger surface area allows for better. So, in that situation, the more surface area you've got, and then the better job it does. So I think in his mind, if he did that and it was him doing it, this will make it quicker. This will guarantee it because, that is, it's inaccurate, but it is knowledge I had heard passed around. I'd done martial arts most of my life and I heard that for years and years and years, and it's not true. And it wasn't until later on as stuff becomes better known and stuff, you start seeing smaller devices used to cut people because, the science is there. But that would be my only explanation. But if I'm saying that to defend why he done it, then I have to look at, I'm saying this guy with CTE who is extremely unstable for whatever reason took the time to do this, unless maybe he did know. Right. But it doesn't add up from the point of view of, but that would be the only reason why I could think he done it. Now, if someone else was doing it to him, that really doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Well,
Like
if
it only
someone
makes
else was
sense
doing
if
it to him, if someone else was doing it to him, they would do it to. Well, let's say you figure out a wrestler lives here. He's got money. You're going to want, you've got 3 people. You've got one for somebody watching the child, somebody watching the wife. You've got the husband down in the basement. How could you, well, you have a gun. You have his family gone. He's going to do everything you say to protect his family. So you've got him tied up like this, but you might have to go out in public with him to get your money or get whatever you want. So you wouldn't want him to look like he was beat out of hell, because that would draw attention to you. And, that you just wouldn't do that. Now, that's possible. It's also possible that Chris was vain and he didn't want to have any marks on his body when it was found. That's possible. I just think that's weird that he had the protective fabric.
It is a really weird, to me, it's one of the harder things to explain.
Yeah.
It really is, because there's not just a clear logical explanation for it. For me, if somebody's got it, they've never let it out, because that's something that a lot of people gloss over. And to be honest with you, I didn't think a whole lot about it at first. And then the more you hear, you're like, well, why? Like, especially if he did it himself, unless he had this knowledge, but that's a vague knowledge. And that's something that, are you going to think of that in the moment? And my God, with the method that he used, once that pin was pulled from that machine and that 250 pounds dropped, it didn't matter what was around your neck. As long as it didn't break, you were going to break.
Right. Let's see now. And there was different deputies on scene, studied different things. Deputies, detectives, that, Chris's body was hanging in the air. You said, you heard that it was hanging, looked like he was standing there. Some people say he was, slumped over. Some people say he was sitting. All kinds of different reports from people that are on the scene in the police report. That contradicts itself. I think that's very odd.
Well, I had an idea on that. And my first thing is, if what I heard was correct, it was 250 pounds that was used to break his neck. So my first thought was, okay, what's Chris's walking around weight? And about everywhere I look,
it's like 232 or something like that, wasn't it?
220 to 230. So if he had been, say, 260 to 270, then his body could have pulled down to a certain point and slumped over and raised that weight. And I wonder, if maybe decomposition could add some weight, because I've heard
definitely
minimum weight, but it's still not going to get him to that 250 pounds. Now, I wonder what kind of, is that resistance? Is there something in that pulley system that makes his 220, because it is a pulley? Is it make his 220 equivalent to or greater than the 250? And if it does, then that would allow for him to slump down, like some of them had said. And, once the initial injury had occurred, he would slump down. Over time, the body would pull itself down. But regardless, why is there not a consistent story of the positioning of his body? Because like you said, you have all these people on site and you have crime scene photos, you have all this documentation. Why wasn't that at least tidied up or addressed and went, okay, I said this and it's because of this, and it's because I seen him through a mirror, or it's because, like, it's never addressed. That part never made sense to me, why they could not verify. And now you're telling me that it's different in the police report, which makes it even worse. Like, how can you verify that?
Yeah. Well, as far as the weight stuff, and I didn't get that far into this dive, but I did read 2 different things online, and I was not able to verify these. One of them stated that he was 233, like 233 and a half, and he added, I guess with the pulley and pin and putting weight in, he added six more pounds, which is what he hung himself on. There was another one that said there was 2 40-pound weights, I guess like right beneath his hands, like his hands had opened up and he dropped them. That, he had 2 40-pound weights in each hand and dropped them, and then that's what took him up. But I didn't get that far, into the just due to time, because of so forth. But that is a question that, as far as I looked in the police report, I did not have an answer to. Now, there are some things, and this was an article online that I found, and I cross-referenced, and I had where I found it, I wrote down, but I don't have that with me. But I cross-referenced this to stuff in the police file. And it's, starts out and it says, why Chris Benoit may be innocent. The police cannot find the needles they say Chris used to inject himself with a sedative shortly before he died. And we talked about that a little bit in part 1. They've never been able to find that. They've never found his cell phone. Then we already talked about the weight machine and where his body was found.
Yeah.
Now, this is in the police report. The medical examiner says that Chris Benoit died on Saturday. The text messages were sent on Sunday. Chris was already dead, so who sent the text messages? Chris's cell phone has never been found. And when police tried to get the data from Verizon, there was told there was some kind of outage and they had storage problems and they were not to recover anything.
Yeah.
No steroids were found in Chris's body. They were found in the house, but none in his body. Let's see. Chris sent Chavo Guerrero a text telling him his address. Why would he need to tell him his address when he'd been there the weekend before?
Well, I wonder though, is that the only time he ever been there? Because if it had, they live in different states, and you'd have to send me the address,
Okay.
or if he was expecting him to call the police, Chavo's not going to know his address off the top of his head.
Okay.
So if Chavo, if he's saying, if he's expecting to maybe say, hey, or hinting, hey, I need help, or hey, I'm about to do something bad, then you got to put it in there, because I've got hundreds of people who know where I live, but they can't tell you my physical address. So if they're calling, and we live in the country, you can say, well, you go up such and such holler, this and that. That's one thing. But in an area like that, with somebody that's not from his area, you'd have to give them an address.
Okay. Now, let's see. What was the next one? Okay. According to the autopsy, Chris's body was badly decomposed, about the same as Nancy's. This shows he would have died sooner than Sunday. Why would he tie Nancy up to kill her? Why would he not hit her just one good time and she would have been out? That was a question that was asked, and so forth. And are you froze? And Justin's froze. Okay. So we'll wait on Justin to hopefully his internet will pick back up. We're a little bit over an hour into this. I mean, this is just, we're close to the end, but it's going to be a lot of discussion before we get there. A lot of discussion. So, we lost Justin. He'll be back here in just a moment. But we're talking about the Chris Benoit murders. And again, this case was there was so much that was reported that came out years later. This wasn't true. You got that wrong. The child was not mentally handicapped. He was not, a little person. He was normal. He was doing good in school. He loved horses. He was really skilled on a horse. That was some of the things that Daniel liked to do in his spare time and was really good at. And Justin's back with us. We're adding him back here. Oh, you're totally fine, brother. What was the last thing that you heard before you froze up there?
We were discussing them not finding the phone and that stuff.
Okay.
And then we got into the autopsy. Oh shoot, I can't remember something that the medical examiner.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you know, and I stated this earlier, but to state it again and ask, you know, that Chris's body, the medical examiner said Chris's body was badly decomposed, about the same as Nancy's. That showed he died sooner than Sunday. Okay, now this is one that I want you to comment on first. You said that in, I think it was in the part 1. You said you heard on Fox News first report that what? Do you remember what you said?
He shot him.
Okay. All right. Now, this was, like I said, this was from the article, you know, this stuff here that I cross-referenced and verified. I wasn't able to verify this particular piece of information in the actual police report, but I've got something else that I think does back it up. And it says the World News is reporting the manner of deaths wrong. He says that Daniel was shot in the head and Nancy was shot in the chest. And that would explain why pictures have not been put out to the public 16 years later. Because people would pick up on that. They would know that that's a lie.
But why would they hide the fact that they'd been shot? I don't.
Okay. I will get to that. Let's see. Chavo
Because
said
now
that
you have to look at Fox News. Fox News has taken credit for that.
Okay,
they weren't even a reliable source on any of their information.
Okay. Now
They
this
were
is
just
World
running.
News. This is not just Fox. This is listed as World News reporting, which would be more than one station.
But I wonder if
one outlet.
they jumped on that, because they will do that. You know, you've had CNN do false reports, and then Fox will jump right on and file the same false report. And then there was one time here in the last couple of years that they actually blamed it. Said, well, we got this from news being reported by CNN. But now I'm not saying it's not possible, but I haven't seen anything other than the Fox saying that they thought they were shot.
Well, I want the questions that you've asked to be answered in just a few minutes before that ends. But I mean, I was really into this case, you know.
Yeah.
Let's see. Chavo Guerrero has stated in interviews and in print that Chris seemed worried about something weeks before, you know, all this happened, but he never would tell him what it was. Again, there were 10 empty beer cans, and an empty bottle of wine.
He was in the gym with
his body.
Chris. Yeah.
He tested negative for the alcohol. Okay, so that's my bad. The empty beer cans were in, you know, in and around Chris, but there was no alcohol in his system.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second here. Okay, so still got some more. Nancy Benoit's death was posted on the internet 14 hours before her body was found. That's a question that you asked earlier.
Well, on Wiki, actually, it had kind of made it online before that.
Okay.
It was on a WWF chat room before that. Somebody had come on and said something to the effect of she had died. They may have even said he murdered him, but I'm not 100% sure of that. And they think
the murder thing was not there, just that she had died.
So that popped up on a chat room about the live event that really had nothing to do with this kid in Stanford. Now that's what made it really confusing for people, because with Wiki you could look, and then they found out it did come from Stanford, which is close to WWE.
Yeah,
you know, and they found the kid. They got his computer. The Stanford police did, and they forensically went inside of his computer. And you know what he didn't say, hey, Chris Benoit murdered his wife and son. He just put that Chris Benoit his wife had passed away. Is what he had put. And then he claims it's a coincidence.
Yeah, he was a kid, teenager, totally cooperative. He claims he just made it up. So, you know, that explains that. It's been noted in, you know, video in publication format that his colleagues have stated he started taking different routes home from work. He was acting strange. He wasn't his normal self. Let's see. The location of Nancy's body kept changing. First, it was on the first floor, in the downstairs family room. Then it was up in the upstairs bedroom, and then she was found in the office, in the house office. Let me just glance back over these really quick to make sure I covered them all, because there's a lot of them. Yeah, I think I did. So now, after that, that's the facts. A lot of the facts that are in the police report and some other, things that I think could be credible online. Now I'm going to go back really quick to let's see. Yeah, go back to this one page just to go over some stuff. Do you have anything to add, Justin, while I'm digging up the rest of my stuff here?
The big thing, like a lot of people, and it got me into it, was this, like I said, this phone call that Chavo had with Eddie, and he heard intruders, and that was reported on WWE Magazine. WWE had a gag order on Benoit's name at that time. You couldn't have even talked about it. That interview doesn't exist online in print. Nobody can find it. Chavo's never mentioned it, doesn't admit to saying it. So that was clearly one of the fakest parts of this. So that was a big one. And then Nancy's sister, kind of, because it was pushed so hard that Daniel was handicapped and he wasn't. No, and you mentioned the paranoia. There was a lot of reference to that from the time Eddie died all the way up until Chris died, of him being really paranoid. And I've seen that behavior in somebody that, I can only assume, because he's not died and they've not opened up his brain, has CTE. And I've seen that paranoia, and I understand, like, I could see that if that's the case, if it is CTE, him having that paranoia.
Right. And a lot of people do think that was, that he did do that. Okay. So I'm going to state these things really quick and then get to some other possible things in this case. And I'm just throwing these out in any random order. First, I want to note that the medical examiner, Chris Sperry, resigned on November 1st, 2015. He had a side business going, and he was illegally billing the state for time that he was doing private work for people. His colleagues have also stated that he sometimes would just assume stuff and not really do the research or the correct results as to what he stated happened. Yeah. Other pathologists have called him an idiot, and one of them actually said he was a bumbling idiot and he was unprofessional. He twice publicly contradicted his own deputy's opinions in front of people. So this came out on him, and he resigned. So the medical examiner may not have been on the up and up there.
Yeah, he's had issues, like you said, with other cases and stuff too. Yes. I don't think he was very good at his job.
No, he was not. Okay, so the next door neighbor, Holly, that let everyone in. Give me 1 second to make sure I didn't miss anything. No, I have not missed anything. Okay. So the next door neighbor, Holly, that wrote a statement, handwritten. It was not signed, was not dated by the sheriff's office. She helped them. She put the dogs up. She actually was the one that found Daniel, told them how to get there. She has said numerous times that she encountered WWE wrestler Dave Taylor and his wife Lisa and some other unknown person, that they did not live in a neighborhood. They were carrying a plate of food, a platter, deli platter, toward the Benoit house. The police claim she never told them that. They have no record of this. Taylor was asked about this, and he said that he was in Texas on the WWE tour, which has been backed up by Steven Regal. When asked while he was on the tour, even though he wasn't booked, he said so he could serve as a substitute if needed and draw on his advance of his guaranteed money. This has been refuted by various wrestlers who have worked for the WWE and WCW, who have said that the WWE
Don't do guaranteed money.
do not do that. And there's no record of this. Okay.
That's odd that you say that, because one of the things in it that I found out was the way Regal acted during Monday night.
His interview. Yes. And that's what I was going to mention next. The way that Regal acted in his interview. And basically all he said was Chris was a great performer, you know, and I'm paraphrasing stuff like that is basically all he said. Now, the neighbor said that she saw that on a Friday. She saw that on a Friday.
See, I never heard that. I don't ever heard that she saw it on Sunday.
Oh, no. And I told you earlier that she sent him on Sunday. No, she sent him the next day as well. Okay. Give me 1 second. This is just, I mean, and all this that I've explained, this is what I jotted down. This is what changed my mind. Okay. So she asserts that she told them that. She told them that. They say no, that she did not. She stated that she saw the same three people. Let's see. They came with food on Friday. They left the house on Saturday. They were wearing dark clothing. And they seemed to be really out of place, like they shouldn't have been there. They didn't seem the same as they was leaving as they did arriving, more or less. Okay, so she did. It was on the Saturday that she recognized Dave Taylor. Chris also had a handprint on the back of his neck. No one's ever mentioned that. That is true. He did. There was one fingerprint, or there was one set of prints that was also found, but they were never scanned to find out whose they were. Okay, now this is from other detectives that were on the scene. Now, this, what I'm getting ready to say, was posted on Reddit. Now, I know you're going to say, yeah, that's Reddit. That's like Wikipedia. You can't believe it. That's true. But I want to point out that Reddit has had success a few times in solving unclosed old code cases. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. Now, what I'm about to say makes me think that just the way that it's typed out, that it is legit, that it was put there by someone that was probably at the scene, helping work the scene. And it says that detectives on scene thought this was a murder, strictly a murder, but the lead detective wrote it off and told his men it was a murder-suicide the same exact day with less than 24 hours. This was done by this leading detective to save him time. Now, the key word there says scene. He said others on scene. I know. Would you say on scene if you were typing something on Reddit?
Probably not, because I wouldn't, I wouldn't reference it, because that almost makes you feel like you're saying it like you're there.
Exactly. Who would use the word scene when writing something out, typing something out?
A law enforcement officer.
Exactly. And that's what he put, or that's what someone put. And so you ask why someone would just rule it, that he done this. Okay. And I told you I'd answer that question for you. It could be that the lead detective was lazy. We actually know that because you can look at the case report at all the stuff that I pointed out that you don't do, that was contradicts itself. If he was a lead detective, it would have been his job to review all that before he put it out to the public. If he did, he's shitty at his job. So we know that he's lazy. Okay, you
That's
as a
true.
medical examiner don't have a good reputation. You have the witness that states without the shadow of a doubt she saw, Dave Taylor, his wife Lisa, and someone else go there on Friday evening with a tray of deli sandwiches, leave the next day on Saturday, and that they acted different.
Yeah.
What did Chris Benoit text to Chavo Guerrero while he was missing the event the first time?
The first email, I called him,
First
and
text.
then
Right.
the first text was
Well,
the dogs are in the side yard or whatever, and the address, wasn't it?
Well, wasn't there at one point that he said that Nancy and Daniel were sick with food poisoning?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember I pointed out all the dirty dishes in the sink? In the picture, there's more dirty dishes than what 3 people would make.
Mm-hmm.
And so many dirty dishes are there.
Enough for 5, 6 people.
Let's see, 6 people. That's exactly. There's 5 in the sink, 1 on the counter. So why? I'm just going to point something out here. Okay. Dave Taylor worked for the WWE prior to, when he got his push. He was a trainer in Ohio Valley, and he worked there for a little while and quit because he did not want to relocate to Cincinnati. In January of 2006, he started working for the WWE again. Now, this was less than 60 days after Eddie Guerrero passed away in November of 2005. Now, when he started working again in ring for WWE, he got a huge push in March of 2006 that he never got before. Now, he got injured, and he stayed on the payroll until April 2008. If you're guaranteed or promised a job, that may give you motive. I'm just saying, what if, The fact is, according to the autopsy, Chris Benoit died on Saturday, or whatever happened, died on Saturday. How was he sending text messages on Sunday? He wasn't. The answer's clear. He wasn't. He was not. Why could they never find the phone? Because the people that were seen leaving took it with them. They were sending the text messages on that Sunday.
The phone thing. Yeah, the phone thing throws me for a loop.
You're going to find a phone. I mean, you will find. Yeah, they missed stuff, but the phone would have been found. I mean, the phone would have been found.
The only way you don't find it is if he leaves the house, takes the phone with him, gets rid of it somewhere, and then comes back. And there's no evidence that he ever left that house after that weekend.
Right. Now, if you think that, that never happened, that's impossible. That's like organized crime. Look up the Dino Bravo murder and read a little bit about it. Then come back and look at this and make your decision. Me personally, based on the police report, even though it's shoddy at best, but cross-referencing it with stuff, and based on the photos, based on the sedatives that was found, the missing cell phone, the plates, all that, I think this case needs to be reopened and looked at again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would. I mean, if there's still enough for them to do something with, either way, I'd like to. I mean,
honestly, the only thing that you would have is if there was any of the physical evidence that was kept last time. I mean, that would be the only way. I mean, probably in all likelihood, you would have the police report and the autopsy report and any photos or videos or statements. That would be the only thing you would have to go on. So,
yeah, I think
I think it's possible he did not do this.
The only I'll be honest with you, to me it all fits perfect that he did. The only issues, and I've got it down, the few interesting things that got me, is Dave Taylor at the house, Regal's reaction, and the phone.
Mhm.
And those three things, I don't see any motive for the WWE. I don't really see
Well,
a motive.
I'm not saying it's WWE, but look at
Well-
the time. Oh, okay. I forgot to mention what I mentioned. Who was on the board of the WWE on the WWE? Who made rules? Kevin Sullivan.
Well, see, I don't see any issue for Sullivan.
The
Like,
day
I don't see
you do
Sullivan
realize
pushed.
that all this took place too 10 years after Kevin and Nancy's divorce, right?
That was so loose on that date, and like I somebody done a pretty good breakdown of the timeline, and they put that on there. So if they're accurate, that was pretty loose. But I mean, Sullivan pushed him after. There was nobody comes out and says, well, Sullivan had issues with him after that happened.
Mhm.
They interviewed Sullivan after it happened, because Sullivan booked his own divorce. But Sullivan pushed him. Sullivan made him champion after that.
Yes, he did.
I don't see, and then I've seen interviews with Sullivan talking about it. Like, nothing about Sullivan makes me think like Sullivan
even threatened him as well.
So,
what better way to cover your ass and then making somebody champion? I didn't do it. I made him champion.
But then wait 10 years to do it. Like Sullivan would be last on my, if he is murdered.
Right.
Sullivan would be last.
And I'm not saying it's him. I'm just throwing out other possibilities, other suspects. I'm not saying the WWE hired anybody to do it. I think Dave Taylor's full of shit. I think that
has he ever addressed it? Like, has he ever talked about it at all? Like, I didn't see it.
He said that it was not true.
That he wasn't.
Stephen Regal,
yes, he said he was in Texas.
Said he was in
Texas. I see the guaranteed money thing. That was why a lot of wrestlers went to WCW. That's why Nash, Hall, and Hogan all went. Guaranteed money up front, more days off, and favored nation clauses in their contracts. So, that doesn't make sense for him to say he was promised money, unless now I was under the impression he was an agent at that time. So as an agent, maybe he should be there, but he was definitely still wrestling at the time, because I know Regal was doing both. Regal was an agent and a wrestler at the time.
Right. No, Dave was just a wrestler, and like a trainer wrestler. But I think that this deserves to be looked at again. I think it could be very possible that Chris Benoit did not do this.
Who could? I mean, outside of the police wanting to open that, there's not very little hope of that, though, is there?
No. They would have to open it.
Families are satisfied.
Yeah, the families are satisfied. The missing cell phone, that's the biggest thing to me.
Well, now see, that's something that it doesn't make sense. Like, it really does, unless they're as inept as we think they are. And it was there, like you said, a 6,000 square foot house, and it was there. Now, you talked about the time of death and the text messages. I didn't see anywhere, like, my understanding from what I seen, and that was because I don't understand that end of it as well, but listening to the guy from the HBO shows, and then looking at what they actually said was time of death, and then when the time that these were sent, because these were sent technically Sunday, but they were sent after midnight Saturday. They were sent very early in the morning. Scott Armstrong and Chavo got them, but for the window that the coroner give,
for him to die close to when Nancy died, based on the decomposition of the body.
He definitely could have given them. He definitely could have sent the messages and still died within that time frame, because the hit or miss area there, my understanding was midnight of Saturday to 5 or 6 a.m. whatever.
If that was the case, what happened to the cell phone?
Well, that's what I'm saying. The cell phone is the issue to me. Not if he sent the text. He had time in the time frame to send the text, based on what I seen now.
Right.
But now the actual cell phone itself and it being disappeared, that I can't explain.
Now, you may say, and I've seen people online saying, well, he hid it, he buried it. No, because
why would he? You're not hiding evidence on a suicide. Like, the
pool has been filled in. There's no longer a pool there. If you look at aerial photos, the family that bought the house, I mean, and they got a I'm not. I'll tell you that off there. What was that?
I'd say they got a good deal.
Well, I mean, they got it for less than $250,000.
Wow.
So they done some work and remodeled the house. So when you're pulling all this stuff, if something was hid, you would have found something.
Well, that's me. I would think if it's there, they would have found it.
Exactly. And even though they lacked evidence, there was people after the fact. Her family went through that place with a fine-tooth comb, because when they found one piece of evidence, they kept looking on purpose to find more if there was something else they missed. That's what you're supposed to do in law enforcement. If I'm patting you down and I find one gun, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to take and put that away and pat you down again, because if I find one, there could be another one. I'm not going to quit until I find nothing. So, and that's what her family did. You're not going to kill yourself and then hide the phone. I mean, that doesn't make sense.
No,
I mean, and if the lady Holly, who I'm sure embarrasses the deputies to death, the criticism they've got or should have got to let her go in by herself, the neighbor, why would they not put that in the report? Because the lead detective said, this is what happened. This is what we're going to put down. This is what happened.
Yeah. Just make it as clean cut as it can be and get it over with.
Exactly. Saves time. And the report was out, 5 months later. So case closed. So, I mean, you should, if you have an unsolved murder, I mean, in our state, I think you have to keep it open at least a year, a minimum of a year, but I mean, yeah, murder, suicide, different, but, save time. And that's obvious that the guy in charge wanted to do that just by looking at the ramblings and the idiotic police report. So, I mean, this case was fascinating. Like I said, I drank the Kool-Aid before and kind of bought everything that the media told me. But
now, see, I went the opposite. I in the beginning, I believed wholeheartedly it was a conspiracy because of what I seen on the media was saying it looked like a conspiracy. So the input I was getting was the opposite.
Well, but then the media came back.
It's only been a couple, like, not even really that was a conspiracy, just that,
right.
That it wasn't definitive.
Right.
But now, see, that to me, I got the opposite. And it really is. That's the scary thing about the world today. It's a matter of where you find your information.
Yep.
At the end of this, I came out with a conclusive. Like, to me, I didn't see, like I said, Dave Taylor, the phone, and Regal. That's the only things that are mildly suspicious. But, look at Kennedy. I have never really completely been able to doubt Kennedy being a conspiracy to kill him.
Right.
Because there's motive, there's evidence, and there's what appears to be cover up, and there's tons of things linking. Now, something that you've had people on talk about on your show, and something that
at your show too.
Standpoint. Well, yeah, but before I came, like, but before was the first time I come, but it is flat Earth, and not that. Okay, could flat Earth be real? No, I don't believe that it could be, and I do believe in science. But here's the thing: talking about one of their biggest things is I need a motive from them, and their motive is NASA doesn't want you to know the truth. Okay, I need NASA to need a motive. Right. I need someone to have a motive to kill Chris Benoit, and I don't think Sullivan getting out of a marriage.
Right. No,
I'm not. And Sullivan doesn't have a bad reputation. Like that's something that was different to me. Like, he's been called crazy and he's been called this and this and difficult, but he has a pretty respectable reputation in wrestling to always do the right thing, even when personally it hurt him.
Yeah.
Sullivan in WCW at the time Hogan first came there booked himself towards the top a little bit. But Sullivan wasn't throwing a belt on himself. He wasn't giving himself guaranteed money, favored nations clauses. He wasn't doing any of that with himself at WCW. And he made a lot of push for Benoit. And a lot of guys have said he didn't want Benoit to leave when he left. He was the guy that booked the Benoit dropping the belt. I think it was Nash.
Right.
Which is believable. Nash was a big guy. So I just don't see a motive for anybody there. Whereas to me, what the family thinks happened and what, when I looked into it, everyone else that I seen, like that was talked about thought happened, made sense to me. And I think the one of those three things that I had a hard time explaining, the one of them that I can put some common sense to for me is Regal.
Mhm.
Think Regal knew the level of dysfunction in that relationship. And I think Regal realized they're all three dead and at the house, he's probably done it. I think Regal realized that. But everything I said means nothing if they can't justifiably give a good explanation for where the phone is.
I don't think that the police did a thorough job. I don't think
they did either.
I think there was a lot of questions left unanswered. I still think there's a lot of questions left unanswered. I think that, like I said, and I already said it, this case needs to have a second look. It needs to be looked at again. It could be a combination of the lead detective and the autopsy guy both being lazy, both being dumbasses, and I'm not saying that it's WWE or Kevin Sullivan or somebody hired. I just wanted to give you another possibility. Now,
well, I think you did, and like I said, you keep bringing me back to the one thing I can't explain no matter what I do, and that one, it's a big element. It's a big element, and I know a case that I may mention to you, like I don't think any viewers would be super familiar with it, but you may have heard something about it. I mean, I'd rather mention it off air, but there's a suicide case that was just automatically deemed a suicide. I never looked into that. I've always had serious question about, but I understand there was no reason for them to do any type of investigation into it. And that, so maybe this is one of those situations, like you said, this lazy cop, because it's been pretty clear they're not good at keeping records and they're not real good at their job. And you've got a doofus of a medical examiner that'll probably take bribes and do whatever you want because he's already cheated for money. You just go in and go, look, we can make this hard for us. We can make this easy for us. Yep. Here's this spoilt rich wrestler who, was a problem anyway. They may have even been called out on domestics before. He's killed them. Let's just get this done with.
They have been. So, and she actually went through their department to file the protective order and so forth.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like you said. Here's this guy that's not good at his job and don't want to do his job. He's not. He's going to be. His job is a nuisance to him. He just needs a paycheck and he wants it easy. So let's not look into this. And I think you're right. I think the police report and what happened with the medical examiner should warrant a reinvestigation.
Well,
if nothing else, it'll set a precedent because there are, say they go back into it and they find out exactly the same thing. That's fine. But I do believe there'll be cases where the medical examiner messed up or the police didn't do their job, that if you had a precedent set to where you could go, but what about this case? What about the Benoit case? They reopened it due to this. That gives us the right to have it reopened. You might have a lot of innocent people be let back out of jail and a lot of murderers found if that become a possibility. Because you proved inconsistencies in that police report. And so that should be enough for them to reopen an investigation.
Thank you. Well, my gut says to me, and going, back over again, you have the knife under Daniel's bed. As I stated earlier, and if Chris's mind was as gone as they said it was, I don't think he would have had a moment of clarity. I think poor Daniel would have been stabbed to death. That's a big red flag, that knife. Okay. Nancy's feet being bound. That's a big red flag. The handprint or that bruised handprint on the back of Chris's neck, big red flag. Thing around his neck before the actual cable, big red flag. A sedative in his system, the same sedative that was in Nancy's system. If you're going to kill yourself, you're not going to do that. The wine and the alcohol bottles, huge big red flags. The sink full of dirty dishes that people have stated Nancy, that was not her. She would never ever do that. Huge red flags. Yeah. There's just so many red flags, and again, I gave you a scenario earlier. What if there were three people? Okay. There was one in Daniel's room watching him, one in Nancy watching her, and then the main man was in with Chris. Okay, and then you have the neighbor that asserts she saw 3 people Friday evening, plate of sandwiches, or tray of deli sandwiches. Chris calls, or text or whatever. They've got, they've had food poisoning, and then the next day they leave. I mean, this is kind of like The Strangers and the movie The Strangers in real life.
Yeah, except Liv Tyler's not there and it doesn't suck.
Yep.
Well, but and you make a good point. You've got the sedative in the system. Dave Taylor's a big dude. This is Benoit's family, and if he doesn't want you, like, he's going to fight to the death over his family.
Oh yeah.
So you are going to have to sedate him, and then at that point,
have to separate him from his family too to keep him under control.
And at that point, maybe it makes sense. Okay, so, and it does. So they've fed him a meal, they've sedated him. And then, like you said, they tie up Nancy. You don't really have to do anything with Daniel.
No.
Because he's small and, an adult female was he 7, I think?
Yeah.
Could handle, but could handle this child. Just lock the door, keep him in his room. The worst thing to do is fight, but he's probably not going to fight. He's probably scared to death. So, if something like that did happen, your scenario makes the most sense.
Well,
you're going to have to sedate them first, and it would explain why this needle issue come up. Maybe they weren't injected. Maybe it was in the food. Maybe it was in the alcohol. And if it was given to them on Friday night, and it wasn't a ton of alcohol, and it was given to them in the alcohol on Friday night, then it would be out of their system possibly by Saturday if it's not a ton of alcohol.
That's very possible. Well, I guess we're going to wrap it up, and we'll be back next week with a live stream, a live recorded stream, and audio podcast. And the following week, we'll be back live in the studio, 9:30 a.m. right here on Here at You Bubblegum Part 2.0. Is there anything you want to say before we close it out there, Justin?
This was fun.
I love doing this.
Like this. This was fun. It really was.
Same. I love doing it. Whoever had this idea had a great idea.
And they did. And listen, if you're listening to us and you were in it, there's tons of information. Get in, and this is one of those rabbit holes that are worth going down. Like,
definitely.
It's odds, and there seems to be a fairly good amount of documentation with it.
Oh, definitely, a whole lot. But that'll do it for this week. I want everyone to remember we all have a voice, and together we can change the world.
Don't suck and be good to people.
One day I'm up, the next I'm down. You got my head spin around and round. Too much confusion, no one to blame.
Your systems are offline.
You've been listening to Here to Chew Bubblegum 2.0. Be sure to tune in next week.